Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and a warm welcome, a very warm welcome, to the University of Winchester and to this inaugural lecture. My name is Liz Stewart. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, and it's my pleasure, on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor, who is so sorry she can't be here this evening, to kick off proceedings tonight. Inaugural lectures are a wonderful opportunity for us to celebrate the outstanding work and groundbreaking research of our academics. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce someone who is a shining example of our commitment to both excellence and to values, and to making the world a better place through the work that we do. I'm going to tell you a bit about Maria. She was born into a loving and large family, the second youngest of 8 children. Growing up in the tiny village of Atherton in Lancashire, just south of the Pennines, Maria's mother had a strong belief in the power of education, spending hours every night after school doing extra work with Maria and all of her siblings. These were strong foundations for Maria's successful career in education. After leaving school, Maria studied information management at Leeds Polytechnic. Following her degree, Maria worked for 10 years in learning resources in Bolton, and during this time completed a diploma in management studies, before moving to Edinburgh to become a tutor in a learning resources unit. Maria fell in love with teaching and speaks passionately about the opportunity and confidence it gives to people. Like her mother, she is a strong believer in the power of education. Having completed a diploma in management studies, Maria then decided to follow on with yet more education and studied for her MBA. Maria moved back south of the border to take up a lecturing job at Manchester Metropolitan University, where she was for 10 years. It was moving from there to Salford University where Maria's research career really took off. She took up a senior lecturer position at the prestigious Information Systems Institute, set up by the government at Salford. And while there, she completed her PhD in 2005. Following this, she led a big research project, securing funding from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. The project, called Tales of Things, explored the use of technology in everyday life in a highly creative and innovative way. Working with an Oxfam charity shop, the project attached QR codes to items of clothing, which allowed customers to find out about the stories behind each item of clothing. After a dramatic rise in sales in that shop, Oxfam HQ picked up on it and invited Maria and her team to roll it out elsewhere, culminating in a pop-up shop in Selfridges, attended by none other than Annie Lennox, who donated a dress she'd worn to Nelson Mandela's birthday party. And the rubbing shoulders with celebrities doesn't stop there for Maria. Maria is also an accomplished painter, something that she treasures as a way to express herself and get time out from her academic work. In 2010, Maria was chosen to exhibit at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. Her painting hung alongside one of David Hockney's. After 12 years at Salford, Maria made the move even further south to join us here at the University of Winchester, and we are so delighted that she did. We are hugely thankful for her passion for research excellence, which she helps drive in our Faculty of Business, Law and Sport. And she is just a delightful colleague to work with. In her talk this evening, Maria is going to take us on a journey into the history of knowledge and how we access it, opening our eyes to the ever-increasing expansion of both these areas. This all links to Maria's outstanding research, exploring how new frameworks can be developed for the next generation to make the most of the rapid expansion of knowledge and the technology we use to access it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Maria Burke.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Oh. Deputy Vice-Chancellors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First of all, thank you for those very, very kind words. I'm very, very humbled. And I'm absolutely delighted that so many of you have been able to attend here this evening on this really beautiful, sunny summer's night. So thank you very much for that. The title of the topic for this evening is indeed the ever-expanding boundaries of knowledge. And how do we define the research business for the 21st century? Well, it's a massive topic. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to be organised. So this evening is divided up into 4 areas. We're going to start with creation, a good place to start. We're going to move on to how knowledge is actually organised. We're going to look at the directions that knowledge is taking. And then we're going to touch on the future developments and where it really is going to go in the end of the 21st century and even the 22nd century. So it's a huge aim and we only have 1 hour. So where on earth will we start? Well, perhaps we start with creation, but perhaps we head on down to a planetarium. Because quite often, especially on a rainy Saturday afternoon, I can be found in a planetarium. And this was the South Downs Planetarium with that great man, Sir Patrick Caldwell, who did so much to bring astronomy to everybody, to make it very, very accessible, and did tremendous work on the dark side of the moon. And where are we going to look? Well, we're probably looking at a night sky in the Northern Hemisphere, looking at those beautiful stars. And maybe we're hoping that one day we might see something like that. But of course, for this evening's talk, we have to come back down to Earth. And where on earth shall we actually land? Well, perhaps we could land in Greece. Because Greece, of course, is a wonderful place in terms of philosophy and in terms of ancient philosophy. Because originally the study of knowledge was about epistemology. And epistemology is where really, if you're an academic and you're looking in this area, you're generally referring to knowledge as epistemology. It's a great word. It's a Greek word. So episme and logos, which means reasoning. Episme, which means knowledge. And Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and the sophists and so on all looked at what we can believe. What is justified true belief? Can we actually know anything at all? And they asked those really, really basic questions. And to some extent, we still don't have those kinds of answers. We're still looking, wondering and thinking about those. But maybe that's a good thing. So here we are then today, 21st century. Where do we study knowledge? In general, we look at education. So with schools, colleges, and of course, in higher education, in universities. So if we're going to move on to universities, the question is, why are we here? What is the purpose of higher education? And when I was looking at this, I looked back to the 1960s, and this is from the Robbins report, 1960s. Purpose of higher education is about instruction and skills, about employment. It's about promoting the general powers of the mind. It's about advancing learning, transmitting a common culture and common standards of citizenship. So really very, very worthy. If we fast forward to 2017, and we look perhaps at the Higher Education Funding Council for England, which guides higher education at the moment, the aim there is about creation. It's about sustaining conditions for that world-leading system of higher education. And it's about transforming lives. It's about helping the economy and enriching our everyday society. And yet, higher education doesn't stand still. Just a few weeks ago, we've had the brand new Higher Education and Research Act 2017, which will come into force shortly. And that's really got the emphasis on excellence. So that's about enhancing excellence in research, and that's going to be a really big push. But of course, we don't work alone as researchers. We work in research communities. And so we develop links with people in other universities, nationally, perhaps internationally, which provides a focus for our specific area of research. And it allows that area of research to grow, to really bounce ideas, to create conferences, to meet each other, and to generally enhance knowledge about that particular discipline. So it's about advancing the field and expanding those boundaries of knowledge. But of course, at some stage, we all actually write our papers. And usually we're writing our papers, at some stage, we're actually on our own with our computers actually writing the paper as a research scholar. And what are we doing then? We're discovering knowledge. We're aiming to share the knowledge. We want to disseminate it. And we also want to know about impact. We want to know about who are the beneficiaries of this research. Why am I actually doing this? Who will it help? Will it do good? And what does an academic need to achieve this? Well, it's always about funding and money. It's about support. It's about time. It's about being patient, being inspired, being really imaginative, and also about daring. And I'm going to show you now a short clip. And I think this clip is about daring. And some of the technology that you'll see in this clip started in universities. So the research has actually arisen out of work done by scholars in universities. And it's about the future of technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, this clip's about 4 minutes, so please sit back and relax and enjoy.
I'm the third generation, the X400 Android. I can look after your house, do the cooking.
So that's a wonderful example of how technology is developing and how knowledge is actually being used. And it won't be very long before some of those products are available. There are some early sort of prototypes of some of those products already. So we're going to move on to part 2. And part 2 is about organisation of knowledge. Remember books? Books. William Caxton started with printing beautiful, beautiful books. And for many, many, many years, of course, that was absolutely fine. But of course, as time has gone on, what is it that we have needed as we have collected more and more and more and more information? We've needed systems. The development of systems has brought us so much and enriched our lives in so many different ways. So we're going to take a very brief tour now through the history of computing. Let's have a look at that. Who did it all start with? It started with a mathematics professor, Charles Babbage. And Charles Babbage designed the analytical engine. And the analytical engine is the basic framework for a computer. And amazingly, although it's been adapted and modified, it is actually still the basic framework that is used today. Isn't that amazing? Late 19th century. What a wonderful person. Moving on, early 1940s, very first computer, the Colossus computer. Colossus computer weighed 40 tons. It was amazing. And it was used at Bletchley Park, and it was used for decoding the U-boat transmissions during World War II. After that, we began to see a computer known as ENIAC. And ENIAC was the electronic numerical integrator and computer. But there was real issue with this, because if something went wrong, there were 19,000 vacuum tubes to check. So it would take a while. And there was no operating system, and it could perform just one single task. But nevertheless, in its time, early 40s, it was really, really a real breakthrough. We then began to see the very first public computers, universal automatic computers known as UNIVAC 1. And we began, more or less, to start to see storage on tapes and storage on disks around this time. Now, as well as the history of computers, which is on one side, simultaneously, a little bit later on, we were beginning to see the development of the internet. So, let's briefly have a look. How did the internet come about? Well, the internet actually came about because of space. And this was 1957. This was Sputnik. And Sputnik was put into space by the USSR. And Sputnik was a 58-centimetre polished metallic globe. It was a sphere. And coming out of Sputnik, there were about 4 or 5 radio antennae. And those radio antennae sent radio pulses back down to Earth. It was launched on the 4th of October. It was a real breakthrough. And it worked. It was fabulous. Until, I'm afraid, the end of October. And something really sad happened. It ran out of battery. It's a bit sad. But because of that, the United States reacted. The United States thought, we want to really be leading in the whole area of science and technology. And the United States set up the Advanced Research Project Agency in order to collect together all of the expertise in these kinds of areas. But of course, it wasn't really very long before they realised that there was expertise really all over the United States and all over the world, and they needed some way of speaking to each other. They needed a network. And so, if you start to look at the history of the internet, you'll always see the phrase ARPANET. Well, this is what ARPANET actually was. It was the Advanced Research Project Agency, and it was the network that they set up. It's what was known as an early packet switching network, and a packet was simply the packet of information that was actually being transmitted. It was successful. When we got up, though, to 1970s, the very, very first automatic international connections were made. And they were made between the University of California, UCLA, LA, and Stanford University. So it was really exciting. And there was another one just after that, which was some of the Norwegian universities. So not very long after that, only 4 years after that, there was the invention of the rules that allowed information to be sent back and forth really, really well and really clearly. And that was known as a Global Transmission Protocol, short now to Transmission Control Protocol or Internet Protocol. And you'll see from the acronym TCP/IP that that is still in use today. So it was really, really important. It was a real breakthrough. The very end of the 1980s, 1989, ARPANET closed and something momentous happened. And that was Sir Tim Berners-Lee who invented the World Wide Web. Now, the World Wide Web is important because it's not the internet. It is, in fact, a way, an application that allows us to link together pages and to link together images. So that when a search is actually put into a browser, a computer, all those images are actually able to very, very quickly to come up to the end user. And so that's the World Wide Web. Now, from that point, because the World Wide Web made everything available much faster, technology evolved. And we saw the very first browsers, Mosaic, and with Mosaic, we began to see Google and Yahoo, and some of the ones that are more familiar with us today. We also, during sort of a little bit earlier on than this, we also saw, of course, the rise of the silicon chips, and chips that were being made much, much smaller. And that computer I showed before, the ENIAC computer, which was about 30 tons, is now on about 1 centimetre of a silicon chip. So that's how far we've actually come. So this is an early IBM and an early Mac computer. I remember my very first computer. I rented it from Radio Rentals a long, long time ago, and it was so exciting opening the box. And I still have it somewhere hidden in a cupboard at home. But of course, as time went on, information developed, society developed, speeds got faster. We needed increasingly sophisticated systems. And this, perhaps, is what is much, much more familiar to us today with our iPads, our tablets, and our iPhones. So knowledge is expanding as we capture more and more data using increasingly sophisticated forms of communication. How are we capturing data? Just a few examples in which we capture data on an everyday basis. Credit cards, smart cards, the London Transport Oyster card that collects all that information about your travel on the London Underground. Contactless technology using radio frequency identification. You've seen the newer, some of the OLED technologies that are allowing the curved products. Seen the Sony advert for the new television that curved? And that's organic light emitting diode, different kind of product. And we're seeing the rise in some of the ultra-thin materials. We also still have, of course, the QR code. QR codes are fascinating. And they're still with us today. We all, of course, have a mobile phone. But it's not a phone anymore. It's a mini computer. Just think of all the data that gets captured just in one single day. We also have computers that listen to and interpret our speech patterns. For example, we have Siri. We also have the newer digital assistant products, such as Amazon Echo and Amazon Alexa and Amazon Echo.com now. And Amazon are an interesting company, very much pushing the technology out there. And Amazon are doing something very interesting at the moment in Seattle, where they are launching what they call just walk out shopping. And this is a form of shopping where you can actually go into the shop, you are automatically read by a reader, you can pick up your goods, put them into your bag, and just walk out again. There's no self-service, there's no tills, there's nothing at all. So I'm just going to show you a fairly short clip about Amazon Go.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store, so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it just walk out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
So, that was due to launch a couple of weeks ago, but it does have technical difficulties at the moment, so I'm afraid it's not actually, Amazon Go hasn't gone yet, but it'll be interesting when it does. And of course, finally, we're always capturing data through satellites. So what we've seen then are waves of development in technology, getting faster and faster and faster. Oops. So, if there's all this technology around us, can it then be used to help us as citizens? You saw very early on the Robbins report mentioned citizenship. And now we're looking at smart cities. We've got quite a few smart cities. And smart cities are about where the technology is being deployed to enhance the services for the public, so some of the utilities, but other products as well. So that when you go to one of these cities, it is very, very easy to navigate your way around the entire infrastructure. And again, I'm going to show you a short example of a smart city.
Just how smart is your city? Chances are it's getting smarter by the year. Many governments around the globe are racing to infuse technology into just about every aspect of its city's operations. And I mean every part, including public transportation, IT connectivity, water and power supply, sanitation and solid waste management, efficient urban mobility, e-governance, and citizen participation. And it does this using every buzzword imaginable, from big data to the Internet of Things. So how does a smart city work? Let's look at 3 examples. Here in Singapore, the city-state might be the gold standard of the most extensive effort to collect data on daily living. The government is now deploying systems that can tell when people are smoking in prohibited zones or littering from high-rise housing. Singapore launched its own Smart Nation program in 2014 and will add more cameras like these so the government can effectively monitor crowd density, cleanliness of public spaces, and even the exact movement of every locally registered vehicle. Much of the data it's collecting will be fed into an online platform called Virtual Singapore that gives the government access to how the city is functioning in real time. It could help the government predict how crowds might react to an explosion in a shopping mall, or how infectious disease might spread. Over in Dubai, more than 50 smart services from 22 government entities have been rolled out as part of the government's Smart Dubai initiative. Using the government-provided app Dubai Now, you can do things like pay a speeding ticket, which likely captured you on a public camera and then emailed you the ticket directly. You can also use this same app to pay your electric bill, call a taxi, track the package you sent to your friend, find the nearest ATM, renew your vehicle registration, track the visa status of a relative, and report a violation to the Dubai police. Now head over to Barcelona, where one research firm estimates the city will save billions of dollars a year in energy costs just by installing smart systems like these. Number 1, smart streetlights. Public lighting that adapts and dims when there's no activity but brightens up when sensors detect motion. The second, parking sensors. Instead of driving in circles looking for a spot to park, drivers can get real-time information on an app which locates free parking spots. Sensors on the street curb use lighting and metal detectors to know if a parking spot or loading area is occupied. And finally, garbage sensors, which are actually compact drop-off containers which have a vacuum network through pipes which sucks up trash below ground. The automated waste collection not only lowers noise pollution from garbage trucks, but also lowers costs and keeps bad odor away. Juniper Research estimates that by 2021, cities will save nearly $19 billion by making their cities smart. But of course, to save money, sometimes you have to spend it first. The global smart city market is estimated to attract $15 billion by 2021, and that's just for software. So now companies from Microsoft to Cisco are aiming for a piece of it. In Singapore, Upton Saidi, CNBC.
Still watching? Perfect. Click here to watch another great video from CNBC International. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.
All right, you'll go off in a minute. So fascinating, and all those cities are growing. But what about here? What about London? What are we seeing in London? What do we hear a lot about? We hear about driverless cars, driverless technologies. Shall we take a look at what's happening in Greenwich?
The automated shuttles we're using in our trials are designed for first mile and last mile mobility. That means connecting residential areas to transport and commercial hubs. And that means elderly, disabled users can engage in independent mobility. It also means that existing residents might choose to use public transport rather than get into a privately owned vehicle and have a better and safer, cleaner journey. The technology the vehicle uses is based on a range of different sensors. Primarily, it's vision-based, but it uses a LiDAR map of the environment, a laser-based 3D map of the environment to understand and learn where it needs to navigate in order to complete its journey. And here in Greenwich, they'll be operating in an unsegregated environment, so they need additional software and sensors to be able to do that. That additional technology is coming from a company called Oxbotica. In order to prepare the route for navigation by the shuttle vehicles, Oxbotica have gone through a process of creating a 3D laser point cloud of the environment. That means taking a vehicle equipped with lasers around the routes we'd like the vehicle to travel. It uses that point cloud to learn the route, and then its cameras to navigate and localize once the route is complete. As you could probably expect, we're going to great lengths to ensure the safety of our trial. So we're doing a lot around the preparation of the route, so we understand what are the potential risks, where are we likely to encounter pedestrians emerging suddenly or cyclists emerging suddenly from the route, and we can control the behaviour of the vehicle in those particular environments. And we've only done some limited demonstration trials so far, but in those limited demonstrations, we've seen people are initially slightly anxious, perhaps, unsure about how the vehicle is going to behave, but when they see that the vehicle behaves in a very predictable way, a very safe way, it brakes and steers as they would expect, they learn to enjoy it very, very quickly. And I think that's what we'll see in our trials. These automated shuttles, if they work successfully in Greenwich, and we expect them to, we think they can be delivering automated services in cities in the next couple of years. It will be a long time, though, before we can see automated vehicles that can do all of the journeys that a human driver is currently capable of performing. So there's lots of development work to be done.
So, technology is really advancing. And of course, in a few years' time, all of that is just going to become so seamless and so fast and so much part of our society. So, let's move on then. 21st century issues. It's always about speed. It's always going to be about 24/7, wanting everything always on. It is increasingly about safety and security. We have seen that recently with the NHS scare. Increasingly competitive society. We're seeing disciplines that merge, biology, technology, biotechnology, the rise of robotics, a whole huge area, and development of new materials. So then, how do we form a bridge between all of these developments? How are we actually going to move on? Well, we've certainly seen internet developments with the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is really about that interconnectedness, where our whole lives are actually connected seamlessly to every single product, every single service, every single action that we want to take. Whether we want that or not is something that we as citizens might want to consider, and we'll come to that towards the end of the lecture. We've also seen, of course, storage solutions. The rise of cloud computing. So cloud computing, rather than having local storage, looks for an alternative form of storing which is much more secure. So most of us generally now are using the cloud, we've got information in the cloud. But from all of this, we're also seeing, of course, the rise of social networks and this great array of linkages between people. It's changing the way in which we communicate with each other. It's much more about mobile and it's less about face-to-face. We've seen a rise in social media. But how did we get here? How did we get here? From Charles Babbage in the 19th century, right through to social media, to Facebook, and to all the other whole array of social media that there is. And that's the International Space Station, one of the very first spacewalks. So how did we get here? Well, we saw the rise in traditional media, print, radio, television and film, and the integration of multimedia led to many, many multimedia applications. First, of course, used by the government. We saw that with the Colossus computer, used very much by the military, eventually used by businesses, then used by us at home, and of course today is used by us very much as individuals. And what's this led to? It's led to this huge growth in information, the strong need for information management and a need to manage knowledge. Information is still growing. We produce every day massive data sets. And of course, we've become very familiar with this term, big data. Big data. People really like the internet. Is that what it's beginning to look like? Complexities of big data. Are we always looking and searching for data? What are the numbers? What are the numbers for 2017? Let's take a look. 3.77 billion global internet users, 10% growth on 2016. 4.92 billion global mobile users, slightly smaller growth on 2016. 2.56 active billion mobile social media users, and look at that growth. That growth is the highest of all, 30%, and we're only in May. So by December, that will really radically have increased. And if we think about the world population, the world's population now is 7 billion, and mobile phone saturation is roughly at 6 billion. So there are two questions. Who are the 1 billion who don't have that? And why not? And what can we do about it? That was 3 questions. And we're still collecting data, more data. We're looking for data all the time, looking around us, looking upwards. Still more data. I'm going to stop showing space films in a minute. So we have to organise data. So big data is organised quite neatly, actually, into 4 V's. I like this when I saw this. So you've got the scale, volume of data. How big is that data, actually? Variety, analysis of the different forms of data. Velocity, which is about analysing who is streaming the data. For example, New York Stock Exchange streams massive amounts of data. Same with the similar stock exchanges and other companies as well. Veracity is about the certainty and the accuracy of data. And so that is a really nice framework to start, at least, to look at big data. And if you talk to somebody who deals every day for a job in big data, it won't be very long before you hear a very peculiar term. And this term is Hadoop. And Hadoop is really important because Hadoop at the moment, it's a storage platform. And Hadoop is actually designed to process very, very large data sets across thousands and thousands of computer nodes. So at the moment, it's providing an effective storage solution with no format requirements. Now, how long that will actually last, we don't know. But at the moment, Hadoop is what a lot of companies are actually using. Hadoop's a really peculiar name. I had a look. I thought, what is Hadoop? What does it actually stand for, the acronym? And Dan Coates, who was the creator of Hadoop, named it after his child's stuffed yellow elephant. Because he said that it was original, it was easy to pronounce, and as far as he knew, it didn't mean anything in another language. So that's what Hadoop actually is. So how are we using big data projects? Are they helping us? And actually, they are. They're helping us to cure disease. Data-driven medicine. They're helping us to feed the hungry. They're helping to revolutionize agriculture. They're used by NASA to explore distant planets. They're used to predict and respond to disasters such as earthquakes. And they're used to prevent crime. And you know, when I looked at this slide, I was so proud because I suddenly thought that in our faculty of business, law and sport, we have research going on in all of those areas. In sport very connected with health. In law, looking at algorithms, looking at prevention of crime. And of course, in business and sustainability, it's all about feeding the hungry and helping. And all of us in that faculty, I think, are part at some stage of a big data project. But getting serious, how are we going to research in this area in the future? There's a real need for deeper understanding, for new ways to research. And this is my current work. And when I first started to do this, I kind of thought it'd be just one paper or something, and then I've realised that it's a lifetime's work. So this is my work, and it's the search for new theoretical frameworks in the whole area of the digital economy. So let's take a look. How did disciplines choose a theoretical framework if they've not arisen from a historical tradition of the subject area? So if they've not arisen from medicine and they've not arisen from law, for example. How does that happen? So that's an area to look at. And of course, our lives are affected all the time by technology. Faster, sleeker, lighter, multifunctional technologies that are continually evolving. Why? Why search for a framework? Because our society is changing. We are having very, very new emerging research areas. There has to be a framework that fits this area, that is flexible and yet is robust, and that researchers in the future can use to compare and contrast research in this area. Up to now, more or less, researchers in this area borrow frameworks, and that's absolutely fine. But should we be borrowing? Should we create our own? Should there be something that's new? Do disciplines choose or formulate a framework, and how does that happen? And people actually have been writing about this for a while. So people were writing in 1998 about some of the problems. That was about fitting the discipline of photography and what framework should be used for that sort of research. It was looking particularly at Flickr then, in 1998. Lindholm 2002 looks at the general method of theory building in applied disciplines, and that is quite helpful. I myself, with a colleague, Professor Basden, we looked at the changing identity of a document, from an idea to a document to a digital artifact. And if a document is changing, then the identity and the notion of what that document has become has also changed. And we must require a framework to look at that whole issue. And of course, other disciplines have done this. Sociology in particular have tried to create original frameworks to help with the analysis of complex issues. So we had scholars such as Thurborn, 2006, his wonderful work on the inequalities of the world, and what a huge, huge work that is. And he tried to create a framework, and he did do indeed, that dealt with all aspects of something that was very multi-layered and a multidiscipline topic. And even then he said, but this framework is provisional. It's a classic example of just simply trying and striving to understand the richness and diversity of a very particular research area. The search of others, I'll just mention one or two. Van Dyke, 2006, looked at digital research and said there's just a lack of theory, a lack of conceptual definition. Oxman, also in 2006, looked at the design of the first digital age, and he also put together a framework that he put forward. And he said, well, perhaps we'll look at it in 4 ways. Perhaps it's about 4 components: representation, generation, evaluation, and performance. And that is one way we could look at it. Even within the area of information systems, there was an entire special issue of Information Systems Research Journal looking at the missing IS research agenda. And that was just in 2010, not that long ago. So where do we look? Do we look backwards or do we look forwards? Which discipline do we look at? Do we look at the debates around the definitions of a subject, a topic, or a discipline? Do we search in philosophy, history, economics, education, technology? And I started this whole area with looking at social exchange theory. And I thought, can social exchange theory actually help, which is a sociological framework? So early sociological frameworks were very about the social cultural schools of thought. But they were important because they took into account newly changed and what was then very fast developing society. So their frameworks had to be robust. And what was this answer then from the 1950s, from the 1960s, from Blau and Thébault and Omans, and the group that was considering the positioning of sociology and social psychology during 1959, exploring the notion of what will humans exchange in return for power. And they thought, well, maybe social exchange theory can actually be applied because it's contingent on reward from others. So is that about exchange of goods and exchange of actions? Because are we, in fact, exchanging information? And is that now really our value? Is that where we're placing most of our value now, on that actual information? Does it work in a micro situation? Does it work in a macro situation? Is it relevant to us as individuals, which is where we really are at the moment with technology? Is it relevant to teams? Is it relevant to organisations? And will it be relevant for government? So, the search for the new frameworks for digital research is a contribution towards what I hope will be something that is very new and that will help researchers in future years. And perhaps it is appropriate that social exchange theory, which is old, and the new, which is new technology, should join in order to perhaps pave the way for future generations. And the work in this area is very much ongoing. There are publications at the moment that are being written. I'm working with some of the universities in Stockholm, and of course, constant applications are going to be for funding. But there's always a but with technology. There are other issues around information and technology. And there's a really interesting perspective that I just wanted to mention as we close. And that's about technological determinism. And that term was coined by this very jolly chap, Thorstein Veblen. And that's about this question. Do we create technology because we can do? Or do we create technology because there is a need? And there are whole areas around that, whole areas of debate. Who can access? Are we digital rich or are we digital poor? What's going to happen in the future with information and communication technology type jobs? And also, we're becoming a generation of labels. This label of digital immigrant and digital native and digital surfer. What's going to happen to that going forward? Are we going to become labels? And finally, probably the most worrying question of all: who controls? And finally, I'm going to leave you with this: data space. Is this the final frontier?
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
And of course, that is what we are. We are on this wonderful journey, going forward in research into the unknown and making that unknown something that we do know, that we can use, that will impact in a good way on society. So in order to really understand and manage the ever-expanding boundaries of knowledge, we must have efficient and effective and secure computer systems that we really understand in order to enhance our lives. It is vital that we have new 21st century frameworks that will really help researchers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being such a wonderful, warm audience. I have to say I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope that you have too. Good evening.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Neil Marriott. I'm the other Deputy Vice-Chancellor. So I'm being Liz tonight. Thank you, Maria, for an entertaining and thought-provoking inaugural lecture. I'm sure all your lectures are just as well prepared. Your students are most fortunate indeed. I did wonder how we were going to fit everything into the hour. And I think the secret was when I saw the leap from Plato to the Robbins Report in just one slide. I think that was the secret. What I have learned is that knowledge is fundamentally a human endeavour of discovery and education. And of course, this is core to the mission of the university: to educate, advance knowledge, serve the common good. I'm going to share with you that some of the examples of the new technologies led to some very interesting comments from my colleagues in the front row. That thing. So you could decide who said what, but someone said, "I've got really skinny arms." And someone else said, "I've got wrinkly skin." Anyway, and it was quite interesting also. I thought, I noticed you went back to things like Bletchley Park and things. I've been to Bletchley Park, and it's a marvellous example of human ingenuity in adverse conditions and with limited resources other than brain power. And I think that's really what knowledge is all about. This evening, I have glimpsed the future. I will have to let Colette know that Hadoop is to replace SITS and the CRM. But what I have also learned is that knowledge is about the human endeavour to understand the world, a world that human activity is unfortunately adversely impacting upon. I'm proud that Maria and her colleagues at the Business School are tackling these issues as a champion of responsible management education, and the university more widely is tackling climate change education. Talking of climate change, it is a warm evening. It's even warmer if you're in academic fancy dress. So I'd like to close by thanking you, Maria, and thanking you also for your colleagues for your support for Maria this evening. Please join me in thanking Maria for a wonderful inaugural lecture and every good wish for research in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.